And so here we are, looking at the first Riot Forge game, and out of all the topics, it had to be connected to the Ruination, which wasn't really well received by the League of Legends community. And so of course we were a bit nervous to see if Ruined King can save what was previously ruined. And I'm glad to say that yes, this game is probably way better than you think. So now, without further ado, let's have a look at the goods and the bads of Riot Forge's first game, Ruined King. But don't worry, in this video there will be no spoilers, even though the game has been out for a while now. Also, this gun is obviously fake, it doesn't even have a trigger. Ever since Riot Forge was revealed, we knew that this branch of Riot had two main goals: to expand the League of Legends universe and to tell a good story. Both because with the MOBA format, League of Legends can't do either of these. So I'm very happy to say that's exactly what the Ruined King did. As far as we know, the game has been in the works for about 4 years. That's with the delays and the power outages that happened in Texas. And ultimately, in the end, every single second of wait was worth it. But even those who like the League of Legends universe and those who would like to play the game for the story, stop. Because they are not sure whether they would like the gameplay. So, let's talk about that first. Ruined King is a turn-based RPG, and such it uses turn-based combat. It's the classic, I hit you, and then I wait until you hit me. Now, some turn-based games make it a little bit spicier, where you have a chance to react as the enemy is hitting you. But Airship Syndicate gave their game an even bigger twist. They are using something called the lane system. With this system, the characters on the battlefield don't necessarily take turns as they fight each other. It's not I hit you and then you hit me. And depending on what move you make, you may be faster or slower than the enemy. If the enemy is fast enough, maybe they get to play twice while you only play once. Or maybe they get to play multiple times because you are charging up a heavy attack. I admit that at first look, this system may feel confusing. But after about 4 quick fights, you will quickly get the hang of it. Essentially, every character has two kinds of abilities. Instant abilities, which happen instantly as you press them, and then lane abilities. Most of the time, lane abilities don't happen instantly, and you have the option to cast those abilities in the quick lane, the balance lane, or the power lane. In other words, you are deciding if you want to jab them quickly, jab them decently quickly, or if you want to charge up your attack. And this affects your speed during the combat. Because you see, the lanes actually act as a timeline. On that timeline, you can see which character will fight next. And if you do a quick attack, you will be placed closer on the timeline, and if you do a power attack, you will be placed at the back. Now that is just one function of the lane system, to serve as a timeline. The other function is that the portraits that show you when each character will fight actually serve as a physical placement on the battlefield. This may be difficult to explain without you playing the game. Essentially, every fight you can see either a buff zone or a debuff zone moving through the timeline. And if on that timeline you get placed into that zone, you either get a buff, or if it is a harmful area, you may take damage. I will try to avoid as many spoilers as possible, but this mechanic is heavily utilized during boss fights. For example, the black mist may suddenly cover half of the timeline, and suddenly the enemy only takes damage if both of you are inside the mist. Once again, I have no idea if this makes any sense to you, but what I'm trying to say is that this lane system is insanely well utilized. And because your attacks behave differently from a traditional turn-based combat, it doesn't feel like you are taking turns to fight each other. It feels more like you are in the middle of an anime fight, and you are choosing which cool moves you want to queue up. And then when it gets to those attacks, you can see it all unfold. Long story short, the combat is actually really good. But in my opinion, as I mentioned, the combat shines the best during boss fights. And Airship Syndicate made sure every boss fight feels different. It's to such a degree that I actually felt like I was playing an MMO again. I had to pay attention to the boss abilities, otherwise I would die. And every single boss is different. Not just different from each other, but they usually have mechanics that are vastly different from anything else you have seen before. Once again, I will avoid spoilers. but there may be a boss who is summoning followers, and those followers will worship that boss. And the boss only takes damage if you kill the followers as they are worshipping it. You know, stuff like that. Once again, the combat is good. Now, unfortunately, if you don't like turn-based combat, this game will not make you love it. But if you don't mind this kind of gameplay, it will make the game a lot more interesting for you. With that said, if you absolutely hate it and you can't stand turn-based combat, there is always the story mode. You see, Airship Syndicate were so clever that they knew that some people would like to play the game only for the story. And story mode is exactly for those people. This is a special mode which allows you to skip any combat at any moment. You get full XP, you get all the loot, you just skip the combat. Yes, this does remove a big chunk of the game, but you still do have the option to blitz through the game just to see the story, which is something not a lot of games would do for you. Usually a story mode in other games is essentially the same gameplay, but the numbers are a bit lower. Maybe you do a bit more damage, maybe the enemy has less health, but you still have to grind through the game. In Ruined King, they knew people wouldn't like to grind through the game if they really don't like the gameplay. And so they gave you the option to just straight up skip it. So yeah, if you really don't like this kind of gameplay, don't worry, you don't need to go through it. But then, of course, turn-based combat is not the only thing this game can offer you. Because remember, this is a turn-based RPG. And so, it actually has a lot of RPG elements. The first RPG element is, of course, equipable items. No matter what RPG you are playing, you always want to find some juicy loot and equip it onto your character. And the good news is, that's exactly what you do in this game as well. Each character has a number of equipment slots. You have a weapon, base armor, rings, and trinkets. Unfortunately, out of all of these, only the weapon changes the appearance of the character. Personally, in RPGs, I love collecting loot because I love to change the appearance of my character. But unfortunately, in Ruined King, only the weapon changes the appearance. Which is still pretty badass. You can still make Braum carry a giant Shadow Isles door. Or you can equip Yasuo with Mana Moon. But yes, just know that the core RPG element, items, are here. Besides this, you also have the classic potions and consumables, and you also have food which you may eat during resting, and that will give you additional buffs. And this is only scratching the surface, because then we get to the abilities. Every couple of levels, and yes, by the way, you also level up in this game, you get extra points which you can use to upgrade some of your abilities. Now, considering the fact that every champion has about 9 different abilities, that's a lot of personal customization, which also includes customizing the passives. And even that is still not it, because then there are also runes. Runes are additional passives which you can slap on top of what the characters already do. Combining all of these systems together, including the items that may have special effects, customizable abilities, and passive runes, you can play any champion in any way you want. I personally like to stack stamina on my Braum so that my Braum has more health than the bosses. But you can also turn Braum into a shielding support, so that he can constantly shield your allies. You can play Pike as a debuff machine, where he's constantly debuffing enemies with random debuffs. Or you can play him as a crit-based assassin, where, with a setup that may take up to 3 turns, he can ambush someone from stealth for all of their health. Simply said, the gameplay customization in this game is insane. And it's really fun to experiment with the champions to see what they can do. But the thing is, even though you can customize how different champions behave, somehow the abilities they have always feel like they come from that champion. In League, we are used to each champion having 4 abilities and 1 passive. Here, the champions have 3 instant abilities, 3 defensive abilities, 3 offensive abilities, and 3 ultimates. And all of them make sense. They always feel like they are in character. Yasuo playing his flute wouldn't be an ability in League of Legends. I mean, it is his dance, but in Ruined King, that's how he can cleanse debuffs. He also does have the classic Soryegeton ultimate, but he also has a quick ultimate, which is the nice anime slash. Or he can just summon a tornado. Braum can punch you in the face really hard, he can summon an avalanche, or he can summon Poros. Once again, all of those abilities make sense. And don't get me started on Pike, he can spit on you. But yeah, he also has the classic ultimate from League. In short, great job on giving all the champions abilities that fit them. Now once again, if you don't enjoy any of this, you can just walk around and enjoy the scenery. Speaking of which... that scenery is gorgeous, especially on the Shadow Isles. I personally love Bilgewater because it feels really lively as people do basic chores. And the reason why it feels this way is because of the amazing ambience. There are people chopping meat in the markets, cooking stuff in the kitchens, selling some bad stuff on the black markets, and as they walk around, you can hear how chunky they are. Everything, every single detail has a sound effect in this game. Even if it is the slightest, most meaningless thing. The ambience is amazing and it really sells the immersion. You really feel like you are part of this world. The environment artist did an amazing job. Here you are pretty much gonna see three main areas: Bilgewater, the Buru temples, and the Shadow Isles. There is also a fourth area deeper in the vaults of Helya, but I won't spoil that. In Bilgewater, if you know the lore, you may recognize some of the areas. During the intro, you arrive at the Slaughter Docks. That's the place where they butcher the giant sea monsters. And the environment there is incredibly faithful to the concept art on Universe. The Slaughter Docks especially look exactly like what we have seen in the previous art. And the same goes for the Shadow Isles, where, for example, I guess this is not a spoiler because it's quite obvious it's gonna happen, you're even gonna see the very place where the ruination technically happened. It is really these environmental details that really make it amazing for those who love the lore. But of course, all of these environmental details would fail if the animations themselves were not good. And so, once again, I'm glad to say the animations, especially during combat, are amazing. You can really feel the effort that went into this. Whenever you cast an ultimate, it feels like an ultimate. But even the normal moves feel impactful. Be it Pike slashing or Illaoi's healing. But things get better when you start paying attention to the details. I have one really awesome example for you. There is an enemy with a ghost fish who debuffs you when they die. In a normal game, when that enemy dies, I would expect a normal death animation. Well, here, during their death animation, you can actually see them trying to debuff you with that fish. What their abilities described they would do, they are actually doing with their animations. And this goes for every single move. Enemies usually don't have generic animations that would be reused. Different moves use different animations. And funny as it sounds, that's not something you would normally expect in a game. But then, after the environment, after the sound effects, after the animations comes the last puzzle piece. The music. I don't know what to say. Riot is using some kind of sorcery. You see, technically, Riot Forge is not Riot Games. It is a separate studio that is outsourcing other studios. They don't really have access to their own music, they got new people working on that music instead. And still, the music is out of this world. When you step into Bilgewater, you hear the adventurous music. It really enhances the RPG feeling you get. When you step into the ruins of the Shadow Isles, you start feeling the creepy history of this place. And then, perhaps the coolest kind of music kicks in when you step into the Buru temples. In short, the soundtrack, once again, is amazing. And that could be because the composer was actually Gareth Cocker, with his most famous soundtrack perhaps being from Ori and the Blind Forest. But so far, I've been nothing but praising this game. Yes, it definitely deserves it. But no game is perfect. And Ruined King as well has its bad side. Perhaps the biggest issue this game may have, and I admit I did feel it as well, is that it may have too many encounters at times. The way you get into combat is that out in the world you find an enemy. And once you touch each other in the outside world, that's when the combat starts. You may attack them in the outside world before the combat, which will give you some benefits, but that's pretty much how it all works. The issue is that sometimes, and especially during the most mysterious moments, even though you are supposed to be exploring the place and seeing what's actually happening in the story, you constantly get interrupted by more and more enemies. Now, in the rooms where you are solving puzzles, I'm fine with the enemy interrupting me as I'm trying to figure out the solution. But when there is a story happening and we are actually figuring out a mystery, I hate that I have to go through 3 different combats to get to the next part of the story. So yes, I admit there are places in this game where the combat kinda breaks the pace apart. But halfway through the game I realized something. You can actually double the speed of combat. And this, as you would expect, cuts the time in combat in half. But here's the thing, yes, this kinda sounds like an issue, but the game has a solution inside it. As we mentioned before, you can go for the story mode, and you can skip over the fights. And that's the conundrum. Yes, this game does have issues, but the game itself also offers you solutions. And so technically, yes, it is a flaw in the game, but what's preventing you from fixing it yourselves? But then you get to the part where I wanna actually defeat the game on the hardest difficulty. I don't wanna go into story mode, but I also wanna enjoy the story. Yeah, that's the biggest issue. The issue is that you can skip it if you want. So if you really think about it, the bad part of this game is not actually that bad. The game is helping you play it in whatever way you want, but there are also issues that can't be fixed by yourselves. Maybe it's just me because I am a fan of RPG games, but I felt like the side quests were quite bland. They didn't feel as impactful as they would be in other RPGs. Usually side quests have the ability to affect the outside world. In Ruined King I only encountered that once, where you can actually kill a shopkeeper. And yes, there are some funny side quests like looking for a lost pet in Bilgewater, or getting a key from a brood who is obsessed with pretty flowers. But I never felt like the side quests enhanced the main journey. It always felt like a side quest for some extra loot. Never something that would start a journey of its own, which is what you normally do in RPGs. The main quest kinda shows you the path, but it is the side journeys on that main journey that actually make the RPG. In Ruined King, the main journey is still the main journey, and side quests are indeed side quests. In something like Skyrim or The Witcher, the side quests may have as much story as the main quest. Then again, I understand, those are AAA, Ruined King technically not. And yeah, I would say that the best side quests in Ruined King were actually the ones on the bounty board. And also the Brawlers Arena. Then comes the issue that most people who care about the lore might be bringing up. The lack of important side characters. Yes, there is no Karthus, there is no Yorick, and yeah, it would be really cool to see them. But the reality is, and we did talk about this in the interview with the developers, Ruined King had limited budget. And yes, they were thinking about including a lot of different characters. Tahm Kench even almost made it into the game. But with their limited budget, they would choose between making more, less interesting, smaller stories with more characters, or they would focus on a few characters and give them really good stories. And that's what Airship Syndicate chose. So yes, there may not be Yorick, but Maokai is pretty cool. And finally, we also need to talk about bugs. I played on release, so I believe I might have encountered the most of them. And even in my case, it wasn't that bad. There were occasional invisible bridges, some big bosses had the status written in their head, and apparently I have not encountered this, but Muramana on Yasuo in the final fight of the game was broken, as it crashed your game. But as far as I know, all of those are fixed now, so you're fine. And then there are the really minor issues like Kamavor actually still being called Kamavea, because that was the original name for the region, and they didn't realize it, so yeah, that's there. And yes, Necritos of Kamavor was indeed renamed to Necrit, because that character is named after me. I know about it, I don't want to spoil anything, but yes, I do appear in the game. And surprisingly for me, I didn't know about this, it is not a small character. Anyway, all the issues we listed still get heavily outweighed by the one thing which we haven't talked about yet. And it is basically the biggest reason why I would play the game. The fishing. I'm just kidding, yes, it is a really cool minigame, but the main part of this game, of course, is the lore. Because I don't want to spoil anything, there is not much I can talk about, so in general, when they were making this game, they were absolutely paying attention to the canon lore. So yes, Ruined King is canon. With very minor liberties, because, you know, gameplay-wise, it's an RPG game, everyone plays it differently, but yes, the game is canon. It's really cool to see how much this game references past events, such as the Burning Tides, which is the event during which Gangplank died. And then as you walk around the world, you can find different notes and collectibles that reference different things, including incredible stuff such as the reveal of Thresh's real name. There is a newspaper from Noxus describing how Riven was captured in Ionia. There are notes on the Shadow Isles talking about a boy who can speak to the dead. And many, 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 many more. This game has an insane amount of collectibles. And it's not just written notes. Every single item has a description as well. And those items also reference incredible things. There is Shimmer Wine. There is Revek's Paperweight, that's Oriana's father, Caulfield's Hammer, and many, 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 many more. The collectibles are insane. But then, the character interactions are insane as well. Every time two characters talk to each other, especially the two main champions, it feels lively and real. I don't know who wrote it, but god damn it, those conversations are insane. I love how real the characters are. Yasuo and Braum are my best example. Yasuo doesn't like Braum. Normally you would expect all the champions to hang out together and be buddies. But no, out of all people, Yasuo really doesn't like Braum. He finds him incredibly annoying. And that's awesome! Also, I don't wanna spoil it, but two pairs of champions make a real relationship. I don't wanna spoil which champions these are, but yes! Riot went there! There are adult jokes in this game too. Anyway, at some point I will make a separate video talking about the overall story of the game. That's in case you just really don't want to play it. So yes, for now, just believe me, the story is incredible. Even if you hate everything, that might be the reason to play it. So, as we near the end of this video, let's sum it all up. Usually when it comes to reviews, people are looking for some kind of a number. On my scale, out of 10, 5 is the middle ground. 5 is an average game that's kinda like, fine. But rating the Ruined King is not easy, because it depends on a lot of different things. So, personally, for someone like me, if you like the universe of League of Legends, if you like RPGs, and if you like turn-based combat, this is a 9 out of 10 game. You really can't go lower than that. But then the other people come in. So, if you like the League of Legends universe, if you like the world and the characters, but you hate turn-based combat, it is still 8 out of 10 because you can skip it with story mode, and the rest of the game is still incredibly well made. And if you hate all of those things, if you hate the world, if you hate League of Legends, if you hate turn-based combat, and if you hate RPGs, and you still somehow bought the game, it is still 6 out of 10 at the very least. It is definitely above average, even if you hate everything about the game. So, would I recommend you to play this game? Yes, no matter who you are. And so, to close this video, I really wanna mention one thing. When you think From Software, you think about the Dark Souls series. When you think Bethesda, you think first-person RPGs. When you think Final Fantasy, you think NFTs. And so, I would absolutely love it if we could see that when you think Airship Syndicate and Riot Forge, you think an RPG like Ruined King. Even if it is all just reskins, I wanna see more RPGs exactly like this one from the universe of League of Legends. I really hope this is not where the journey ends. This game is far too good. So next time, please, take us somewhere else. Arcane showed us Piltover, Ruined King showed us Bilgewater and the Shadow Isles, Song of Nunu is gonna show us Freljord, give us an RPG in Ionia. This is wishful thinking, but I wanna see Jin's story told in this way.